Welcome to the Psychotherapy Central podcast, where we discuss love, attachment, and healing from trauma. A place where you can gain the knowledge, tools, and wisdom to help you build secure, flourishing relationships. I'm your host, clinical psychotherapist and couples therapist, Jennifer Nurick. Thank you for joining me on this episode. It's so lovely that you're here. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the unblending process in IFS therapy. That's internal family systems therapy. I'm your host, Jen. I'm a certified IFS therapist and clinical psychotherapist. And we're going to be reviewing what I think of as a spiritual process. That unblending is a very powerful way to get to the observer self. To unblend and almost you can externalize the parts of self and reveal more of the soul self or higher self, or there's lots of different names for it, so that those parts can form part to self relationship. So it's a very exciting process, unblending and learning to unblend from your parts. So let's jump in. I'm going to do a quick review of parts, quick review of self, quick review of what exactly blending is before we go into unblending. So parts, as we've discussed in the other episodes, and it is really useful to listen to the other episodes in this IFS series, is that humans are multiplicitous, which means that we have different parts of ourselves that you can think of as subpersonalities with their own ideas, their own belief systems, their own memories. And often these subpersonalities are coming from, think of it as like trapped or frozen energy from different times in your life. And that's kind of the source of them. And the more that those parts get used, the bigger that they become in our system, and the more they start to feel like they're actually us. So I might have a part of me who loves my job, really loves going to work, and then another part of me that's a big hippie and just wants to go traveling. Okay. And so when we have that, we have kind of conflicting parts, and that's probably one of the best ways to understand parts, is when we kind of are wanting something different, or we have one part that really adores our partner and one part of us that finds our partner really irritating, right? So what's the self? Self is compassionate and courageous and connected and creative. And like I said, it's in some traditions it might be called the higher self or the soul. But what's important in IFS therapy is that the whole system is happiest when it's being self-led. And that means when all of these different parts that are vying for attention, vying for a voice, often linked in with trapped and traumatized parts, are connected to the self, they feel much more settled, safer, and held. Next is, what's blending? So there's two different ways that we can be blended. The first is when we're so blended with a part that it feels like, well, that is me. Okay. So it might be, let's say I have a really strong manager part. And that strong manager part is very good at organizing my life, very good at controlling the food that I have, the exercise that I do, getting through my to-do list. I get lots of accolades at work because I'm so task-oriented and get stuff done. And that's a part of me. That would be a manager part of me. And I might be so blended with that part that starts to feel like me. Well, that's me. That's self. Or another very common one is being so blended with a critical part, the voice in your head that sounds like, I'm an imposter, I'm no good at that, I'm no good at relationships, I don't look right. So sometimes we're very blended with a critical voice. The second way we get blended with parts is when a trigger happens. So something happens and it reminds a part of us of something from the past where we've needed to be protected. So something's happened in the present that doesn't feel safe. My inner alarm bells go off because I've sensed danger. This protective part jumps into action. Okay, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, and it's really served me in the past. It's jumping into action. And this might be like, let's call this one, this might be a firefighter part. And I spoke about this in the last episode, the difference between managers, firefighters, and exiles. And let's say that this is a binge eating part, right? So this part, all these feelings might be coming up because of the trigger. And so I start binge eating. Okay, I'm tucking into Mars bar after Mars bar after Mars bar. And so that's not there all the time. It's just there when the system senses danger or is triggered in some way. And that is, the sense of that is like, I don't know what happened to me. Suddenly this rage came over me, or suddenly this part came over me and I just was tucking into everything I could find to eat. Yeah. So when we're blended in one of those two ways, we're not anchored in self. We've been taken over by one of those amazing subpersonalities that were so helpful and often protective and often really looking out for us in the past, and have got so strong that there's no relationship to self anymore. Okay, and maybe self wasn't really present when they were being developed. So for example, let's give another example. You might find yourself not feeling noticed in relationship, and you might notice that kind of when that happens, you get blended with this 6-year-old part who starts to shout and starts to attack your partner and deal with the relationship like a 6-year-old would deal with a relationship, and trying to get their needs met. And then they have a genuine need to feel noticed, to feel important in that relationship. But the problem is that they're trying to get their needs met in the way that a 6-year-old would try and get their needs met, which can cause a lot of issues in your relationship. So in that moment, you're blended with the 6-year-old part. And it's kind of like self as the sun gets covered by the cloud of that 6-year-old. And remembering that the 6-year-old has positive intentions. At the core, they're just trying to get their needs for attention and trying to get their other needs met, right? So they're not bad. And the founder of IFS, Richard Schwartz, has a brilliant book called No Bad Parts, and the link to that is in the episode notes. Moving to unblending next. So as an adult, it is important to learn the skill of unblending from a part, so that when you're taken over by a part, you can notice it, number one, this is not self, I'm blended. And then you can look at lovingly unblending from that part. So let's delve into the process of that. Let's give another example. Let's say you have a deadline at work and this very critical, pushy part of you starts to take over. And the voice in your head that goes with that pushy and critical part says, you've left it too late. You can't do a good job at this. You're an imposter. You're going to get found out and you shouldn't even be in this job. Your heart rate goes up. You feel your whole system go into fight or flight. Now, whenever a critical part comes up, we can know that often it's a managing part of our system. Okay, so you've become blended in that moment with a manager. And remembering that that manager in the past has probably been really helpful. She's probably helped you meet deadlines, get things done, and probably been helpful in some ways. But then that voice has become so loud that it's tipped over and it's become not helpful. Okay. So step one, getting to know and take care of this manager. So I'm going to share an example now from my own system and from my own therapy work, because I'm a therapist who gets therapy. I believe very strongly that all therapists should still be in therapy and doing that inner work as well as receiving supervision. So I receive different kinds of supervision from different authorities and leaders in the field. I'm very lucky with my supervisors, and I also receive therapy. And over the years, I've received lots of different kinds of therapy so that I could be sitting in the receiving seat and experience the healing in an embodied way. So let me go back. So first up, we ask if this critical part would be willing to step out of my body so I can have a little bit of distance from it. Okay, this is the first unblending technique, because as soon as that critical part stands outside of me, then there is a me who is watching the other part, and there is a me who is dialoguing with the other part. And as she stepped out of my system, I could see that although she sounded quite old and quite bossy and firm, that actually she looked like 12-year-old me. And she was strong and assertive and really good at getting stuff done. So at this point, I asked a key IFS question to myself, which is, this is an unblending question. So if you've got a notepad and pen, write this down. I asked myself, how do I feel towards that part? Okay, I'll say it again. How do I feel towards that part as I see that 12-year-old standing there next to me? And in that moment, I felt angry towards her. She's bossy and critical and pushing me too hard. And so that means that I'm now blended with an angry part. So there's now 3 parts of me present. There's the critical part outside. There is the angry part that I've just felt. And underneath that, there's always self, because self exists in all of us at the core. So now I let the angry part know that I understand why she's angry at that critical part. Okay, I understand that. And I ask if that angry part would be willing to step aside while I continue to attend to or work with, however you want to phrase it, the critical part. Okay, so that's another example of unblending. I'm now unblending from this angry part. So this angry part kind of looks at me, and then she steps aside and she watches what I do next with the critical part. So I ask myself again, how do I feel towards that critical 12-year-old? And this time I feel sorry for her. Okay, I can see how hard she's been working at 12, how hard she's been working to change her life, and feeling that her success at age 12 was actually a matter of life or death for her. It felt like life or death. So of course she goes into fight or flight when suddenly there are deadlines and tasks to meet. Yeah. So I feel compassionate. And when there is compassion and kind of feeling sorry for and a softening towards the critical part, I know that self is present, that self energy is here to take care of that critical 12-year-old. Because I don't want to be taking care of the critical 12-year-old from this angry part. Okay, I want to be taking care of her from self. So this is how you access the self energy to care for the part that you're working with. And when we're in self energy, it's a really powerful way to become our own healer. This is the healing agent, the healing elixir that is in all of our systems that we are all born with. That light of the sun that so many of our parts are waiting to make contact with, to be held, loved, and nurtured by. In a lot of my work, I call this the nurturing parent part, but essentially it's the self, it's the soul, higher self part in other languaging. And that part is very, very transformative and powerful as a leading agent of the system. So I hope you got a really good understanding there of the unblending process. I really invite you to practice that today. Maybe listen to the example again, maybe take some notes and have a go yourself. In the next episode, we'll be looking at healing trauma using IFS. So if you don't want to miss that, please make sure that you subscribe and then you'll be notified when it releases. If you like what you heard today, please like, subscribe and share. It really helps to grow the channel. The show notes for today will be available on my website, psychotherapycentral.health, and you'll find my free course on breaking relationship cycles. So I really hope that this information is helping you on your healing journey, and wherever you are, I hope you have a really wonderful day. Thank you for joining me on this episode. If you want to learn more about all things love, attachment and trauma, I'd love to connect with you on Instagram at psychotherapy.central or visit my website at psychotherapycentral.health. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd greatly appreciate it if you could leave a review and a 5-star rating. Your support means a lot, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon.